would end up in a hospital like this. I always hated hospitals. The smell of medicine, the sound of beeping machines, the cold white walls. But I had no choice. It started with a terrible pain in my stomach. I ignored it for days, thinking it would go away. It didn't. It got worse. One night, I collapsed in my apartment. My friend found me and called an ambulance. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, an IV in my arm. A nurse in a pale blue uniform smiled at me. "You're awake. That's good. Don't worry, we'll take care of you." I tried to ask where I was, but my throat was dry. She gave me water. "You had a severe infection. We had to bring you here. You'll be fine in a few days." I nodded weakly. She seemed nice, but something about the hospital felt off. It was too quiet. Hospitals were never quiet. There were no sounds of nurses talking, no patients moaning, no carts rolling through the halls. Just silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I heard something outside my room, a soft shuffling sound. I thought it was a nurse, but when I peeked out the door, the hallway was empty. The lights flickered. Then I heard whispering, faint voices, like a conversation in another room. But the whispers were not normal. They were strange, like multiple voices speaking at once. I couldn't understand the words, but I felt cold all over. I closed my door and got back into bed, pulling the blanket over me. Maybe I was just imagining things. Maybe it was the medication. The next morning, a different nurse came to check on me. Her name tag said, "Alice." "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Better, I think," I said. "But I heard something last night, whispering." She froze for a second. Then she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, you must have been dreaming. This hospital is very quiet at night." Too quiet, I thought. Over the next few days, I noticed more strange things. Patients didn't talk. They just lay in their beds, staring at the ceiling. Their eyes were empty, as if they weren't really there. One night, I woke up to a scratching sound. It was coming from the room next to mine. I pressed the call button for the nurse, but no one came. The scratching got louder. I got out of bed and slowly opened my door. The hallway was dark. The lights flickered again. I turned towards the room next to mine. The door was slightly open. I shouldn't have looked inside, but I did. And I regret it. Inside, a patient was sitting up in bed, facing the wall. Their hands were bloody, scratching at the wall like they were trying to dig through it. I gasped. The patient stopped scratching. Slowly, their head turned toward me. Their face was wrong. Their mouth was too wide. Their eyes were black, empty holes. They grinned and whispered, "Help us." I slammed the door and ran back to my room. I locked the door and crawled into bed, shaking. The whispers returned. They were right outside my door. That night, I didn't sleep. I decided I needed to leave. I didn't care if I wasn't fully healed. Something was wrong with this hospital. The next morning, I told Alice I wanted to go home. She just smiled. "You can't leave yet." "But I feel fine," I said. "I need to go." Her smile faded. "No one leaves the silent ward." My heart pounded. "The silent ward?" She nodded. "You weren't supposed to wake up," she whispered. Then she left. I panicked. I got out of bed and grabbed my things. I opened the door slowly, checking the hallway. It was empty. I walked quickly, trying to find an exit, but the hallways didn't make sense. I turned left, then right, but I kept ending up back at my room. I heard the whispers again. Closer. The lights flickered again, then they went out completely. Darkness. I felt something behind me. Breathing. I ran. I didn't know where I was going. I just ran. The whispers grew louder. Then, suddenly, I saw it. A door with a red exit sign above it. I sprinted towards it. My hand touched the handle. Pain shot through my body. Everything went black. I woke up in bed. The hospital bed. The same room. As if I had never left. Alice stood beside me. She leaned in close. "You can't leave," she whispered. I wanted to scream, but my body wouldn't move. The door opened. More nurses walked in. Their eyes were black. Their smiles were too wide. The last thing I heard before darkness took me again was the whisper, "You are one of us now." I don't know how much time passed. When I woke up, I felt different, heavy. My body didn't respond the way it should. My limbs tingled, like they weren't completely mine anymore. The room was the same, but something was off. I tried to move, but my arms wouldn't obey. My legs felt frozen. I could only move my head slightly. Alice was still there, standing in the corner, watching me. "Good," she said softly. "You're waking up properly this time." What's happening to me?" I forced the words out, my voice weak. She tilted her head. "You're becoming part of the ward." My chest tightened. I don't want to be part of the ward." Alice only smiled. I turned my head slowly to look at the IV connected to my arm. A thick, dark liquid was flowing into my veins. It wasn't clear like normal IV fluids. It was black, oily, and pulsing like it was alive. Panic surged through me, but my body was still numb. I tried to rip the IV out, but my hands wouldn't move. My fingers twitched, but that was it. Alice stepped closer. "You'll understand soon," she whispered. The whispers started again. They were in the walls. The lights flickered, and for a split second, the room changed. The white hospital walls peeled away, revealing something rotten beneath, dark, fleshy walls that pulsed like a heartbeat. The ceiling dripped with something thick and red. The floor was covered in deep scratches. Then the lights flickered back, and everything was normal again. Except I knew it wasn't. Alice saw the terror in my eyes and leaned down. "You saw it, didn't you?" she whispered. I swallowed hard. "What is this place?" She straightened up. "A hospital, of course." "No, it's something else." My voice was shaking. "What have you done to me?" Alice didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the door. "Rest," she said before stepping out. The door clicked shut and locked. I don't know how long I lay there, unable to move. I faded in and out of consciousness. Sometimes I could hear the whispers in the room with me. Sometimes I could feel something standing right beside my bed, watching, waiting. At some point, my body started responding again. The numbness faded. I flexed my fingers, then my arms. I reached for the IV and ripped it out. Thick black liquid dripped from the needle. It smelled rotten. I had to get out. I forced myself out of bed, my legs weak and shaking. My head spun, but I pushed forward. The door was still locked. I turned, looking for another way out. That's when I noticed something strange. The window. It wasn't showing the outside world. It showed another hospital room. A mirror? No. I stepped closer. Inside that room, a patient lay in bed. But they weren't normal. Their mouth was wide open, too wide, stretching unnaturally. Their arms were too long, their fingers sharp like claws, their eyes were black voids. And then, they moved. Their heads snapped toward me, their black eyes locked onto mine, and they grinned. I stumbled back. The figure in the window twitched violently, like a puppet with broken strings. Then it lunged. I screamed. The glass cracked. I turned and ran for the door, pounding on it. "Let me out! Let me out!" The whispers grew louder. Behind me, the window shattered. A long, clawed hand reached through. I turned just in time to see the creature crawling through the broken glass, its body twisting unnaturally. It was one of the patients, or at least it used to be. It crawled towards me, grinning that impossible grin. The door behind me suddenly unlocked. I didn't question it. I ran. The hospital was different now. The hallways were stretched, longer than before. The lights above flickered, some completely burned out. The walls had deep scratches on them, like something had been trying to claw its way out. I ran blindly, my heart pounding. The whispers followed me. I turned a corner and stopped. The hallway split into 3 paths. I looked back. The creature was still coming, crawling, fast. I had no time to think. I took the left path. The hallway twisted unnaturally, like it wasn't supposed to exist. The walls pulsed, like they were alive. My breathing was ragged. Then, a figure appeared ahead. Alice. She was standing in the middle of the hallway, smiling. "You're going the wrong way," she said calmly. I skidded to a stop. What is this place? What do you want from me? Alice tilted her head. You've been chosen. Chosen for what? To stay. She lifted her hand and pointed behind me. I turned. The creature was right there. Too close. I had no time to run. It grabbed me, its cold, sharp fingers digging into my skin. I screamed. Darkness swallowed me whole. I woke up in another hospital bed, another room. But this time, something was different. I felt empty. I sat up slowly. My body didn't feel like mine anymore. My hands were too pale, my fingers too long. I stood up, stepping towards the mirror on the wall. I didn't recognize the reflection. My eyes were black voids, my mouth too wide. I turned to the door. It opened by itself. Alice stood there smiling. You understand now, don't you? She whispered. Behind her, in the hallway, I saw them. Other patients, just like me. Black eyes, twisted faces. They whispered together, their voices melting into one. Alice stepped aside. Welcome to the silent ward, she said. And I stepped forward because I didn't have a choice anymore. Because I was one of them now. Forever. I don't know why I agreed to stay overnight at the hospital. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I just wanted to help my friend Alex, who worked as a night shift nurse. But I regret everything now. It started as a normal night. Alex told me that this hospital had been abandoned for years, but some doctors and nurses still worked here because of secret government research. That was strange, but I laughed and said, that sounds like a horror movie. Alex smiled. Yeah, but nothing scary ever happens here. He was wrong. At first, everything was quiet. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and something rotten. The white walls were peeling, and the lights flickered. I sat in the nurse's station, watching Alex check his clipboard. At 2 a.m., something strange happened. The hallway lights turned off. The only light came from a few emergency bulbs, glowing red. I heard a faint sound, like someone whispering. I asked Alex. He frowned. Hear what? A cold feeling crawled up my spine. I shook my head. Never mind. But then we both heard it. A loud crash came from room 306. Alex sighed. Probably just a rat. I didn't believe him, but I followed him to room 306. He opened the door slowly, and we stepped inside. The room smelled worse than the hallway, like something had died in there. The bed was empty, but the sheets were torn. The metal tray on the floor was bent, as if something heavy had crushed it. That's when we saw the bloody footprints leading to the window. The window was open, but we were on the 4th floor. I wanted to leave. I told Alex this was a bad idea, but he insisted we check the security cameras. We rushed back to the nurse's station and played the footage from room 306. What we saw made my stomach twist. At exactly 1:59 a.m., the patient in the bed sat up, but there was no patient admitted to that room. The figure was dark, almost like a shadow, but its eyes glowed white. It climbed off the bed and walked to the window, but then it turned toward the camera. It saw us. Then the screen went black. Alex and I froze. The hospital was silent. Too silent. Then we heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, dragging footsteps. We turned our heads toward the sound. A tall, dark figure stood at the end of the hallway. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching us. Then it grinned. I grabbed Alex's arm. We need to go, now. But before we could move, the lights shut off completely. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The hallway was empty now. The figure was gone. Alex grabbed my wrist. We have to get to the exit. We ran. The hospital felt bigger, like the hallways stretched longer than before. No matter how far we ran, the exit never came. Then we heard the whispering again. But this time, it was inside our heads. Alex screamed and fell to his knees, holding his head. His eyes turned completely black. No, I shook him. Alex, wake up. He stared at me, his mouth moving, but it wasn't his voice that spoke. She's coming. My blood turned cold. Who? The lights flickered back on, and Alex collapsed. I turned my head slowly. A woman stood in the middle of the hallway, wearing a hospital gown. Her head was tilted unnaturally. Her neck twisted like someone had broken it. Her long black hair covered half her face, but I could see her white, glowing eyes. She smiled. Then she ran toward me. I don't remember running. I don't remember grabbing Alex and dragging him, but somehow we ended up in the hospital basement. It was dark, damp, and smelled like mold. The air was heavy. My phone flashlight flickered, and I smacked it, desperate for light. Then I saw the old patient files stacked on a desk. The papers were yellow and dusty. I flipped through them, my hands shaking. One name kept appearing, Amelia Carter. I turned to Alex, who was finally waking up. "Do you know this name?" His eyes were normal again, but his face was pale. Amelia Carter. She was a patient here. "When?" I asked. He swallowed hard. 30 years ago, I kept reading. Amelia Carter was admitted after a car accident. She suffered brain damage and died during surgery. But the doctor in charge, Dr. Reynolds, didn't record her death properly. The file ended with one sentence, "Patient never discharged." A loud knock came from the metal door behind us. Boom, boom, boom. I turned slowly. The doorknob twisted. Alex grabbed my arm. "We have to hide." We crawled under the desk, holding our breath. The door burst open, and footsteps echoed in the basement. She was here. I peeked through the desk. Amelia's body was twisted, her arms hanging unnaturally. She sniffed the air like she could smell us. Then she whispered, "You can't leave." I closed my eyes, hoping she wouldn't find us. Then silence. After a few minutes, Alex nudged me. "She's gone." We crawled out and ran back upstairs. This time the hallways were normal. The exit door was right there. Without looking back, we pushed through and ran into the parking lot. The cold air hit my face and I gasped. We were outside. Alex turned to me. We made it. But when I looked at the hospital, my heart stopped. Through the 4th floor window, Amelia stood watching us, and she was smiling. I wanted to believe it was over, that we had escaped. But as I stood in the parking lot, staring up at that window, I knew the nightmare wasn't finished. Amelia Carter was still inside the hospital, watching, waiting. Alex grabbed my wrist. "Come on, let's go." I hesitated. "What if she follows us?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We both knew the truth. She would follow. We got into Alex's car. His hands were shaking as he started the engine. The hospital lights flickered behind us as if the building itself was alive. As we drove away, I forced myself to look forward, but I could still feel her eyes on me. Alex spoke first. "We have to tell someone." I shook my head. "Tell them what? That a dead woman tried to kill us?" He didn't respond. We drove in silence, but my mind was racing. I kept thinking about the file. Amelia was never discharged. Maybe she was still trapped in that hospital, unable to leave. But if that was true, why was she watching us now? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have left." I stared at the screen, my hands going cold. Alex glanced at me. "What's wrong?" I showed him the text. His face turned pale. "Who sent that?" "Bond." My phone buzzed again. Another message. "Come back." I nearly dropped the phone. Alex gripped the steering wheel tighter. "We're not going back." But as we turned onto my street, the street lights flickered off. The entire road went dark. And then, in the rearview mirror, I saw something standing in the middle of the road behind us. Amelia. We didn't talk about what we saw. We just drove faster. When we finally reached my apartment, I ran inside and locked the door. My hands were still shaking. I turned to Alex. "She followed us." He nodded slowly. "I know." I checked my phone again. No new messages, but I had this sick feeling in my stomach. Then the lights in my apartment flickered. Alex and I both froze. A single knock echoed from the front door. I turned the peephole. My heart nearly stopped. No one was there. Another knock. Louder. I stepped back. Alex, he was staring at my phone. His hands were shaking. I looked down. My screen was on. The camera was open. And in the reflection behind me, I saw her. Standing right behind me. I spun around, but nothing was there. Then my phone vibrated one more time. Let me in." We didn't sleep that night. Every sound, every flicker of light, every shadow felt like it was her. By morning I was exhausted, but I knew one thing: Amelia wasn't going to stop. I took out my laptop and searched for anything about her. News articles, old hospital records, anything. And I found it. Amelia Carter was never buried. Her body went missing after she died. The hospital covered it up, claiming a recording error, but there were rumors. People said the hospital experimented on her body, that she never really left. "She's looking for something," Alex said quietly. I nodded. "Or someone." We both knew what that meant. She wasn't done with us. I don't know why we did it. Maybe we were stupid. Maybe we were scared. But that night, we went back to the hospital. Armed with only our flashlights and a crowbar, we stepped into the dark hallway. The air was thick, the stench of rot stronger than before. The hospital was waiting. We made our way back to the basement. The moment we stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind. We were trapped. Then we heard it, whispering, and then a voice. "You came back." We turned. Amelia stood in the corner, her head tilted, her black hair dripping onto the floor. Her mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. "Now you can never leave." I don't remember screaming. I don't remember running. All I remember is grabbing Alex's arm and running for my life. The hospital twisted around us, the halls stretching, shifting, warping. The exit was gone. Laughter echoed through the walls. Then, just as I thought we were doomed, a door opened. A new hallway, a way out. Without thinking, we ran through it. The moment we crossed the threshold, the hospital vanished behind us. We were standing outside, the night sky above us, the cold wind on our skin. Alex turned to me, breathing heavily. "Is it over?" I didn't answer, because in the distance, in the reflection of a nearby window, I saw her, still watching, still waiting, and I knew it was never over. For days after we escaped, Alex and I tried to return to normal life, but we couldn't. Strange things kept happening. Lights flickered whenever I entered a room. I saw shadows moving in my apartment when no one was there. My phone would vibrate at exactly 1:59 a.m. every night, but there was never a message. And sometimes, I saw her reflection in mirrors, watching, smiling. Alex was getting worse too. He barely spoke. He didn't sleep. Then one night he called me. His voice was weak. I can still hear her. My stomach tightened. "Alex, where are you?" I think I have to go back." "No," I said quickly. "That's what she wants." He didn't answer, and then the line went dead. I didn't have a choice. I had to find him. I drove to the hospital, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The building loomed ahead, dark and lifeless, but I knew better. It wasn't empty. I stepped inside. The air was thick, suffocating. The smell of decay was worse than before. The lights flickered weakly, barely illuminating the hallway. Then I heard it, a voice. "He's with me now." Amelia. I followed the sound to the basement. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I stepped through the doorway. Alex was standing in the center of the room. His back was to me. "Alex?" My voice cracked. He didn't move. Then he turned too slowly, like something was forcing him. His eyes were black. "She won't let me go," he whispered. A cold breath touched the back of my neck. I spun around. Amelia was there, inches from me. Her face was wrong, stretched too wide, her grin too sharp. Her white eyes burned into mine. "You should not have come back." I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. Then she whispered something that made my blood freeze. "Choose." I didn't understand. My breathing was ragged, my chest tight. "Choose what?" She tilted her head. "One of you leaves, the other stays." I turned to Alex. His face was pale, his body. She was forcing me to decide. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't. I grabbed Alex's arm, trying to pull him away. "We're both leaving." Amelia's grin disappeared. The room shook. The walls cracked, the lights burst, and the air became ice cold. "You cannot break the rules." Alex suddenly screamed. He fell to the ground, his body twisting in pain. "No," I shouted. Stop! Amelia leaned closer. Choose! Tears burned my eyes. This wasn't fair. I looked at Alex and he met my gaze. His voice was weak. Go. I shook my head. No, I won't leave you. He smiled. A sad, broken smile. Someone has to stop this. Then, before I could react, he shoved me backward. Everything went black. I woke up outside. The hospital was gone. Just an empty lot, as if it had never been there. I screamed Alex's name, but he was gone. I searched for him, called him, went to the police, but no records of the hospital existed. Never been real, but I knew better, because sometimes, late at night, I still get a text, "You shouldn't have left." And in the reflection of my window, I see her, still smiling. I never liked hospitals. The smell of medicine, the white walls, the quiet halls, it always made me uneasy. But when I got into a car accident and broke my leg, I had no choice. I had to stay in the hospital for a while. The ambulance brought me in, and the nurses were kind. They gave me painkillers and put my leg in a cast. The doctor said I would be fine in a few weeks, but I had to stay for observation. I didn't argue. I just wanted to sleep. My room was on the 4th floor, in a quiet part of the hospital. There were no other patients in my room, just me. The nurse, Emily, told me to press the call button if I needed anything. Then she left, and I was alone. That first night, I heard something strange. At first, it was just soft whispers. I thought maybe the nurses were talking in the hallway. But when I looked, the hall was empty. The lights flickered for a second, and I felt cold. I told myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks on me. But then I heard footsteps. They were slow and heavy, like someone dragging their feet. They stopped outside my room. I held my breath. The door didn't open, but I felt like someone was standing there, watching me. I reached for the call button, but the moment I pressed it, the footsteps walked away. A nurse came in a few minutes later. It was Emily again. "Are you okay?" she asked. I nodded. I thought I heard something outside my door." She smiled gently. "It's an old hospital. Sometimes the pipes make noises and the floors creak. Try to get some rest." She left, but I couldn't sleep. The next night was worse. I woke up to a sound inside my room. It was the beeping of my heart monitor, but it wasn't normal. It beeped too fast, then too slow, then stopped completely. I panicked, but when I sat up, the beeping started again, normal this time. Then I saw it, a shadow in the corner of the room. It was tall and thin. It didn't move, but I could feel it staring at me. I reached for the call button, but the lights in my room flickered and went out. The only light came from the hallway, and in that dim glow, I saw the shadow move. It stepped closer. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I shut my eyes and pressed the call button over and over. When I opened my eyes again, the lights were on. The shadow was gone. Emily rushed in. "Are you all right?" I was shaking. "There was someone here." She checked the room, but it was empty. "You had a nightmare," she said gently. "You're on strong medication. It can cause hallucinations." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But it didn't feel like a dream. The third night, I heard the whispers again. But this time, I understood them. "Help me." It was a woman's voice, soft and desperate. I looked around, but I was alone. Then my bed started to shake. Not violently, just a small movement, like something was under it. I froze. Slowly, I peeked over the side of the bed. A pale hand reached out from underneath. I screamed. Emily ran in, and the moment she turned on the light, the hand disappeared. I told her what I saw. She didn't smile this time. She looked nervous. "Did you see her face?" she asked. I shook my head. "Just the hand." Emily sighed. "Maybe you should rest. I'll bring you something to help you sleep." She left quickly, too quickly. She knew something. I didn't want to sleep. I needed answers. So, when Emily brought me the sleeping pills, I hid them under my tongue and spat them out when she left. Then, I waited. At exactly am, my room went cold. The lights flickered again, and I heard crying. It was coming from the hallway. I knew I shouldn't get up. My leg was broken. but something told me I had to see. I grabbed the crutches next to my bed and slowly moved to the door. The hallway was empty, but the crying was louder now. It was coming from room 406. I looked at my own door, room 405, just next door. I hesitated, but then I saw something. A woman in a hospital gown stood at the end of the hallway. Her head was down, her long hair covering her face. She wasn't moving. Then, without a sound, she took a step toward me, then another. I turned and shut my door. My heart was pounding. A loud knock came from the other side. "Help me," the voice whispered again. I backed away from the door. The knocking stopped. Then, I heard the sound of something scratching the wood. Slowly, I moved closer and pressed my ear against the door. For a second, there was nothing. Then, bang! Something slammed against it. I fell back, breathing hard. Then, silence. The next morning, I demanded to see the head nurse. I told her everything. She looked at me, then at Emily, who was standing nearby. Finally, she sighed. "There's something you should know," she said. She told me about a patient named Sarah. She had been in room 406. She was badly injured in an accident, just like me. But one night, the nurses found her missing. They searched everywhere, but she was gone. Days later, they found her body inside the walls of the hospital. Somehow, she had crawled into an old maintenance space and got stuck. She died there, alone. And ever since then, strange things happened in this part of the hospital. I was too scared to stay another night. I begged them to move me, and they finally agreed. As they wheeled me out of the room, I glanced at the door to room 406. It was slightly open, and inside, I saw her, Sarah, standing in the shadows watching me. I never stayed in a hospital again. I couldn't breathe. Sarah was still there, standing in the shadows of room 406, her head tilted slightly, as if she knew I could see her. The nurses kept pushing my wheelchair down the hall, unaware of the cold terror gripping me. I blinked once, twice, hoping she would disappear, but she didn't. She raised her hand, fingers twitching, reaching out toward me. I turned away, squeezing my eyes shut. By the time I opened them again, the room was empty. The door to 406 slowly creaked shut behind us. I didn't say a word as they took me to another part of the hospital, far from the silent ward. But even in my new room, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her. What did she want? Was she warning me, or was she trying to take me with her? The next day, I was ready to leave. The doctor checked my leg, gave me instructions, and told me I could recover at home. My friend came to pick me up, and I felt relief the moment I was wheeled toward the exit. But just before we reached the hospital doors, something made me stop. A sound, a whisper, "Don't go." Cold air brushed against my ear. I turned my head sharply, scanning the hallway behind me, and there she was, Sarah, standing at the end of the corridor, pale and lifeless. Her lips barely moved as she whispered again, "Don't go." But I didn't listen. I told my friend to hurry, and we rushed outside. As soon as we left the hospital, the heavy feeling in my chest lifted. The air felt warmer. The world felt real again. I was safe. At least I thought I was. I tried to move on. For weeks, I had nightmares. I dreamed of dark hospital rooms, whispering voices, and Sarah's pale, lifeless face. But in the daylight, everything felt normal. Until one night. I woke up in my bed, heart racing. I didn't know why, but something felt wrong. Then, I heard it. A slow, rhythmic beep. Beep, 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 like a heart monitor. But there was no machine in my room. The sound was coming from the dark corner near my closet. My breath caught in my throat. A shadow moved. Then, in the dim light from my window, I saw her. Sarah. Standing in my room. She was closer now. Her hollow eyes locked onto mine. My body froze. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. Then, she took a step forward. The whisper came again. "You should have stayed." And everything went black. The next morning, my friend found me on the floor, unconscious. The doctor said I had a panic attack. They told me stress from the accident had caused hallucinations. They gave me more pills, more therapy, more explanations, but they were wrong. Sarah wasn't a hallucination. She followed me. She wanted me back. And every night since, I still hear her whisper. I still see her standing in the shadows, waiting, and I know one day she will take me back to room